We read across that MSPs are operating at such a pace to support their clients that they don't often document well enough the changes that they make internally. So they're so busy delivering the absolute best service, 0-minute downtime service they can to their clients, that they overlook their internal risks. That's a very common occurrence, unfortunately.
You're listening to the MSP Security Playbook, the show where modern MSPs come to sharpen their strategy, streamline operations, and secure their growth. I'm your host, Jacob Hazelbaker, Channel Account Manager at Heimdal Security, where we help MSPs win with unified, AI-powered cybersecurity solutions. And today, we're wrapping up Season 1 with a special episode. Helping us close out the season is Jason Whitehurst, founder of FutureSafe and the exclusive MSP provider of Heimdal Security in the United States. FutureSafe has built a reputation as the MSSP for MSPs, operating behind the scenes to deliver complete cybersecurity stacks, SOC oversight, and operational resilience for the partners they serve. In this episode, Jason explains how his team empowers MSPs without competing with them and the challenges of being invisible but indispensable in a world where trust is everything. We dig into his concept of the theory of one, why consolidating tools, SOCs, and providers isn't just efficient but essential for profitability, and how rigorous vendor vetting ensures every tool in the stack truly delivers. It's a fitting way to wrap up the inaugural season of the MSP Security Playbook. It's an episode about simplification, strategy, and scaling security from someone who's redefining what true partnership looks like in managed security. But before all that, here's Adam Pilton, Heimdal Cybersecurity Advisor, with this week's Threat Brief.
Thanks, Jacob. Your board meets quarterly to review cybersecurity. The CISO presents a dashboard, everyone nods, compliance boxes get ticked. And then 6 months later, you're explaining to regulators how a ransomware gang locked down your entire operation. Most boards aren't governing, they're performing it. The World Economic Forum's 2026 Global Cybersecurity Outlook just exposed the scale of this governance gap, and the numbers are damning. Let's start with the benchmark. In highly resilient organizations, 99% of boards are involved in cybersecurity oversight. That's 99%. And that's not a coincidence. That's a direct correlation between board engagement and organizational resilience. Even among these highly resilient organizations, fewer than half, just 45%, have boards with a clearly defined role in overseeing cybersecurity. And I'm going to ask you to think about that. The board's involved, but more than half don't actually know what they're supposed to be doing. They're attending meetings, reviewing metrics, and approving budgets, but they have no formal accountability, no defined oversight framework, and no clarity on what success looks like. This is the compliance theater I mentioned. It looks like governance, it feels like governance. But when something goes wrong, nobody owns that failure. And that brings us to accountability. In highest resilient organizations, 30% of boards hold members personally liable for cyber breaches. In insufficiently resilient ones, 9%. That's the difference between a board that treats cybersecurity as a strategic priority and one that treats it as a compliance formality. When board members face personal liability, oversight becomes real. Questions get sharper, and vague assurances from management no longer cut it. So here's the question every board member and every executive needs to be asking. Are we playing the compliance game? Or are we effectively implementing cybersecurity across the organization? Because the value isn't in the dashboard. It's in the governance structure that drives real accountability. Here's what boards need to be embracing. First, define your role. Document what cybersecurity oversight means for your board. Who owns what decisions require board approval, what metrics actually matter. If you can't answer these questions clearly, you're not governing, you're observing. Second, establish accountability frameworks. Personal liability focuses attention. Board members should understand the consequences of failing to exercise proper oversight, whether that's regulatory penalties, shareholder lawsuits, or reputational damage. Make it clear that cybersecurity failures are governance failures. And thirdly, stop accepting compliance as proof of security. Frameworks like ISO 27001, NIST CSF, SOC 2, they're all useful, but they're baselines, not finish lines. Ask harder questions. How long would it take us to detect a breach? What's our mean time to contain an incident? Can we operate if our primary systems go down? These are the questions that separate real resilience from regulatory theatre. The World Economic Forum's data makes one thing very clear. Organizations with strong board oversight are more resilient, not because their boards are technical experts, but because they've created clarity, accountability, and visibility across the organization. If you're a board member, ask yourself, do I actually know what I'm responsible for when it comes to cybersecurity? If you're a security professional, ask yourself, does my board have the clarity and accountability they need to govern effectively? Because if the answer is no to either of those questions, you're not building resilience. You're just performing compliance. And when the next major incident hits, that distinction will matter more than any dashboard ever could. Stay sharp. Catch you in the next brief. Back to you, Jacob.
Jason Whitehurst, thank you so much for your time today, sir.
Hey, happy to do it. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. And so for our MSP listeners, FutureSafe is the exclusive provider of Heimdal Security here in the US. So how did that partnership come about, and what strategic gap were you trying to close for MSPs when you brought Heimdal to the States?
I discovered Heimdal because I was already providing a stack of cybersecurity services to my clients, and those stacks were obviously unaware of one another. There was no interconnection between tools. There was no risk data aggregation. There was no, log ingestion that we could do with the proper time correlation or any of that. So, we'd have 6 consoles, 6, 7 agents sometimes for some clients, 2 or 3 SOCs, 5 or 6 support teams, and you're trying to, or at least we're trying to align all of that for the MSPs who work with us. So, being their cybersecurity provider kind of behind the scenes where they don't, their customer doesn't see what we're doing. We have to deliver fully to the MSP. I had been looking for a way out of that problem, meaning the way out of so many agents, so many consoles, having to train my people so many times throughout the month because everybody was releasing updates. It was just too much, just too much. Multiple outages if a vendor had an outage, and it was just, it was hard to do profitably. So I'd been looking for something for months. And someone, I don't even remember who, Rick said, "Hey, have you looked at Heimdal?" So he pointed out the Heimdal's a platform, and I was immediately interested. And so we put it through, when we test a product, particularly an MDR and XDR or something like that, we put it through months of testing. Current ransomware, threat analysis. We try to break things like, the encryption prevention or anything like that. And we put it in active ransomware cases. And Heimdal was good enough to let us. We tested it for 4 or 5 months, I think. And once we've, once we had a good feeling that it really didn't have any major deficiencies that we could come up with. Yeah, we've been doing it for a couple of years now, and I think it's probably the fastest growing cyber solution, in the channel, certainly. And, the message is easy to carry. So it's been good, been real good.
Yeah, thank you for that context. I wanted our listeners to understand kind of our relationship, both as Heimdal and you as the distributor for us in the US. And I also really wanted to bring you on this show because you have a profound amount of experience helping MSPs throughout your life. I think that's really been something that's unique and often allows you to help MSPs in ways a lot of other people aren't. So, Jason, I'm really curious. You do a lot, and how do you balance brand and visibility with the need to build trust and demonstrate tangible value to the MSPs you support?
I hire people much smarter than me that can do that. The thing that I've always been good at is the sizzle and not the steak. What I mean by that is I've always been a really good salesperson. I can sell the smell and the look and the taste of the steak and everything about it, right? But once you buy it, I'm not sure what to do with it after that, right? That's a different set of people, and I mean from operations, delivery, and all of that. So I hire people who are smarter than me around marketing, around, brand, visibility and awareness. I hire the best people I can to do our branding. And so to answer your question, I think more succinctly, in those areas where I struggle, and sometimes it's my visibility or the brand's visibility and how it's seen across the ecosystem. I tend to hire people much smarter than me that know how to do that, to be honest with you. Right. I don't do that on my own. I did for the first 8 years. And, if I could go back and do some things different, I absolutely would. As soon as I can, I hire people who are much smarter than me to do that job.
I love that approach. You acknowledge what you're good at, what other people might be better at, and then you hire people who are really good at a certain thing. Something I've heard you mention is the theory of one. So, what does that mean in practice, and why is unification across different tools, SOCs, and providers so critical for security, especially, and as well as profitability?
So the theory of one is simply, if you can do it, one vendor, one partner, one SOC, one platform, one responsible party, one service delivery model, one incident response process that we buy into, and we do everything we can to make it successful. And we've seen that in a number of ransomware cases. We worked many ransomware cases for clients and non-clients and prospects of MSPs and pretty much everything we can think of. And the problem of resolution in quick fashion and identification and root cause analysis, I've seen over and over again, is exacerbated by sprawl. Tech sprawl, process sprawl, people sprawl. So basically the theory behind it is, if everybody's responsible, nobody's responsible. It's like the office microwave. If everybody's responsible for cleaning it, you can bet it's not going to get clean, right? So it's just the nature of who we are, right? So somebody, that we're not malicious intent. It's just we mentally, believe that just mentally that somebody will take care of it. So the theory one also goes back to one responsible party, if at all possible.
And FutureSafe, especially, is known for very rigorous vendor vetting, sometimes evaluating solutions for months before adopting them. So, when you were looking at different cybersecurity solutions, including Heimdal, what criteria did you use for deciding which vendors made the cut?
I think one of the main criteria was, could we understand intuitively and without a lot of expert vertical knowledge, could we understand what was going on? What we were seeing. How easy was it or difficult, was it for us and the people with whom we were doing the evaluation? How easy was it for us to get an idea of what we were looking at? Even if a platform is incredibly powerful, but it's so complex that it requires months of training and customization, and people don't have a frame of reference when they look at it, it's not useful, unfortunately. And then I think the closely component that we looked at as it relates to that is, did their people have the expertise that were necessary? Sometimes we looked at products that were a generation ahead of other products, but it was a new product and they had 3 employees. And if we ran into any difficulty, we were really kind of on our own. And one of the things that our clients, when we've asked them, why do you work with us? The number one thing they said is that they don't have to worry about the products that we offer being vetted, being evaluated, being assessed, that they're solid, performing as close to leading edge as, or as close to class leading as possible. And if it stops working, we'll quit using it. And there have been 3 times in 8 years that we've wholesale had to stop using a product where we had huge adoption because it just quit doing its core function the way it was supposed to. And that was an expensive decision, but you have to do that when people trust you. All right. So,
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this week's conversation. If you're finding this episode valuable, take a quick second to follow the MSP Security Playbook on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. It really helps us reach more MSPs who want to scale smarter and lead with security, and it keeps this kind of expert insight coming your way. Now, back to the episode. And you've said that IT people aren't necessarily security people sometimes. So what do you mean by that? You kind of spoke earlier to the distinction between people working in the security world versus infrastructure. So for MSPs, it seems like often they're kind of forced to work in both worlds. So for you, what advice do you give them to close the gap between the security world and the infrastructure, the building world?
The problem is a lot of times is both technical and fiscal or financial. And what I mean by that is if an MSP is going to provide cybersecurity services, right? They by and large have to try to get to an economy of scale that makes it a profitable end game for them. They're built around infrastructure being their core service, and so they can be, quite profitable in that area. But when you get to cybersecurity, you have to take, let's say, an MDR product, right? And the margin between what the MSP may pay for it and how that's monetized to the end client. They have to take the fully burdened rate cost of their engineer multiplied by the number of hours that by and large they've all worked on that product. Subtract it from the gross net margin, and in most cases, unless you have thousands and thousands of endpoints, it's not a profitable end game. So, if you come to an MSSP, whether it's us or anybody else, we are bringing hundreds of MSPs together so we can buy in those economies of scale, and we can focus strictly on the service delivery side and the risk mitigation side and the incident response side, that they don't have to. It also takes more skilled and more expensive people by and large to do that kind of work. And infrastructure work and cybersecurity work are often dichotomous from one another, meaning, the infrastructure world is complex and takes quite a bit of understanding. I did it for years and had my MCSE at one point and loved that space. And then you get into cybersecurity, and the mentality around cybersecurity isn't as much about, the same things, right? It's about, conditional access and control and risk mitigation and trying not to make it more difficult for the MSP or the client while still providing security. And then when you deal with incident response, it's not about fixing the problem, it's about identifying the compromise. And that's a different skill set. We invest twice a year in retraining of our SecOps engineers on threat hunting and risk threat hunting, threat identification, incident response, because that skill set has to be sharpened, right? It has to be, has to continue, and it's really hard to do both.
Yeah, it truly is. I did some purple team work for a while and dabbled in both, and then one in the other. And it is difficult to balance it, especially because it's a field that's always changing. Cybersecurity is. So I've been wanting to ask you now for a while, like looking ahead, what kind of threats do you see MSPs facing in the near future?
I think the vast majority of threats right now are in the business email compromise, category. The anything that involves the employee having to do something, because that's always been the Achilles heel for any organization, right? And when we look at ransomware trends or compromise trends, they're very heavily leaning toward compromising that person's credentials and getting access to and exfiltrating data from SharePoint or from their email, anything else they may have online, and not as much the traditional on-site encryption for impact ransomware, where you have a lovely note on your machine and all your data has been exfiltrated and all the sources of backup have been deleted and all that. I mean, we still see that, but not near as often. And that goes back to insurance companies. When someone files a claim for something like that, right? By and large, it's resolved more quickly. And if you have a BC, insurers don't often require the forensics that's required for a traditional ransomware solution. So it's less costly to the business, and there was less interruption, really less downtime. So I think it's shifting for that reason. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that insight. I could see it as well. Business email compromise. And you've seen hundreds of various compromises over the years firsthand. From your experience, one kind of trend you've noticed with MSPs that they often make when they face an incident that they have to respond to.
MSPs do the best they can, and they do a good job by and large. If we get brought into a ransomware case by an MSP, and that happens, and if it's with their client, we generally run into a few things that we can be pretty consistent about. And this is not everybody, so somebody's going to say, "Well, that's not me," and it's probably not. But we run across that MSPs are operating at such a pace to support their clients that they don't often document well enough the changes that they make internally. When we ask them, "Hey, what's this firewall rule for?" All right, we'll often hear, "I don't know," or "I didn't know it was there," or "I'm not sure what it's pointing to," or any number of questions related to that. Can we pull the logs for these tools of visibility, your RMM, and can we, does your RMM logs go anywhere, or are they just strictly on your RMM? How far back can we go? Can we pull this? I don't know. I have to call the company and get back to you. Right. So they're so busy delivering the absolute best service, 0-minute downtime service they can to their clients, that they overlook their internal risks much. In that's a very common occurrence, unfortunately.
Finally, if you had to make one prediction for MSPs in 2026, what should they be preparing for right now? And what are the biggest opportunities for those MSPs who really want to get ahead?
I think traditional IT and cybersecurity will by and large be handled by agentic AI, that the MSP can still add significant value to their clients by moving into areas like compliance, providing the customers a compliance-driven and compliance-based solution. By using AI tools like agentic AI tools for help desk, or whatever they can to reduce their overhead and their costs so that they can stay profitable. But I think in 5 years, this MSP market, won't look anything at all like it looks today.
Lastly, we come to my favorite section of the podcast. We call it the MSP Hot Seat. So, this question for you says, what's one thing MSPs could do tomorrow that would have the single biggest impact on improving their cybersecurity posture?
Yeah, talk to an MSSP and see whether roughly the same cost that they're spending right now, that they can get a fully white glove solution with experts that work behind the scenes, and they don't have to carry that bucket and the in the infrastructure bucket, right? I don't, we're one of the very few that only works with MSPs behind the scenes, but there are companies out there. We're certainly not the only one. Find one that works with you, and if you can, and you remain as close, just as profitable or very close, offload that work if you can, to experts who, when you end up in arbitration or you end up in some type of situation where the MSP is called to question by the client, right? Have a partner who can absolutely survive all of that and be your incident response plan when everything really starts to fall apart. You don't have to do it all by yourself, and you can do it just as profitably and not do it all by yourself. Some cultures don't necessarily allow that, but I tell MSPs that all the time. And the clients that have been with us for a while, they've reported back to us that they couldn't hire people and do it for near what it cost, for what it cost them to work with us, which is negligible when you compare if they just bought it direct from somebody else. So that's what I would do. Focus on your vertical, hyper verticalize for your end clients, healthcare, dentistry, whatever it is, hyper focus if you can to get really good at that. And then, find a cyber partner who can work behind the scenes, and so that it's your branding always, it's your client always, and let them do the other stuff. Right. And you can do that very profitably and scale super quickly that way.
Well, Jason Whitehurst, thank you so much for your time today.
I had a good time, Jacob. I can't wait to see you at the next convention.
really enjoyed today's conversation with Jason Whitehurst. And two things that really stuck out to me was I love how he approaches hiring people. He says he focuses on hiring people who are smarter than him. And so I thought that was humble and really useful for MSPs to take that similar mindset of instead of doing everything all as one person all the time, eventually as your MSP grows, look to hire someone who is smarter than you in the ways that you're not so great at. The other bit of advice he said that really stuck with me was what's called the theory of one. So he described it initially as relating to, for example, a cybersecurity stack. You have a unified stack instead of having all these different tools spread out. That can be useful, especially when you're doing incident responses. So you don't have 5 different tabs you're going through and then correlating to timestamps, etc. So I thought that was really insightful, not just a little behind the scenes of Heimdal in US, but also how someone as experienced as Jason thinks in the business field, what his kind of mentality is, especially as he's grown his business, FutureSafe. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and thank you for listening to the MSP Security Playbook. That wraps up this special episode of the MSP Security Playbook. Throughout the first season, we've explored how modern MSPs can simplify cybersecurity, streamline operations, and build partnerships that actually scale. On a personal note, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I want to thank all the guests once again for sharing their practical insights that you can apply in the real world. So thanks for listening and being part of Season 1. We're proud of the conversations we've had so far and excited for what's on the horizon.